Hi, welcome to today's segment of Our Ventura TV. I'm George Alger, and today's guest expert is award-winning author Alice Rene. One of her books is Becoming Alice, which is a memoir that's based on her beginning story, or the beginning of her life starting in World War II. And today's discussion is going to be based on this novel, The Other Side of Him. Welcome, Alice.
Thank you.
So Alice, let's frame this discussion by giving us a synopsis of what this is about.
It takes place in the 1950s, so it's considered a historical suspense novel, and I had learned in publishing it that anything over 50 years old is considered historic. I always thought it had to be a couple of 100 years old, but I was wrong about that. So that is the genre that it falls into. It is the story about a young woman who starts her life in the projects in Chicago and is the product of a immigrant German mother. And so in the first part of the book, you hear a little bit of German spoken between them, and you learn about what mother cooks for dinner and that kind of thing. But she's a beautiful and very bright young woman who wants to escape the projects, and luckily for her, not only is she beautiful, but she's very smart. So she wins a scholarship and she gets her way through college, and even is working on a master's degree when her brother asks her to go out on a blind date, which she does reluctantly, mainly because she loves her brother. And turns out the blind date is rich and handsome and has everything in the world going for him, but in time she finds out that he's also seriously flawed and she needs to break up with him, at which point in time he doesn't accept rejection very well and he turns into a stalker. So this is basically the story of a young woman with a stalker in her life, and it's quite dramatic and very suspenseful and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera.
Which certainly will frame this discussion quite well, because stalking is such a contemporary issue as well, although I imagine it's gone back a long time.
It did happen in the 50s, because what I didn't tell you is that this story was inspired by true events. Namely, I personally was stalked as a young woman.
So you have very first-hand experience on this.
I know the feeling. And the differential between then and now is that at that point in time, there was no place you could turn for help. The only thing you could try to do is maybe call the police and get a restraining order. But as you know, they can't do anything until the stalker or the husband or whoever it is that abuses a woman, or vice versa, by the way, the sexual orientation can be different. There's nothing they can do until something is done. In other words, until the person's been beaten up or something even more serious than that.
Okay, so let's see if we can get the term stalker defined.
Usually, if you read the literature nowadays on the internet, you will find there are at least a half a dozen, maybe 8 at this point in time, organizations that women can turn to for help, which is wonderful, and they can learn about the signs that she should recognize before she continues in a relationship with a man that could possibly become a stalker. So that part is quite different from the 1950s to now. And that person can also learn about the psychological makeup of a person that could eventually become a stalker. And interestingly enough, that does not necessarily have to be a man. Sometimes it is a woman, and I think you've seen on the news how sometimes women will stalk a movie star or someone very famous because they feel that they're meant to be together, some crazy sort of a thought in their head. But it's a very current problem, and it deals with violence in our society and in all different forms, and this is one of them.
Good. So let's see if we can get a sense of what characteristics and what behavior does constitute a stalker. I mean, if you coincidentally run into someone 2 times in a week at a grocery store and a gas station,
Right.
I wouldn't presume that to be
No.
stalking. So
No.
where does it
Okay,
occur
well-
that this is stalking?
Well, basically, most usually, there has been some sort of a relationship between the two people. And by the way, it sometimes can be of the same sex, so that sometimes I know of a case where 2 neighbors, 2 women that lived next door to one another, and they were both married, that got into sort of a friendship. And when one of the women withdrew from that friendship, the other woman stalked her, to the point where the victim in this case ended up selling her house and moving out of the neighborhood. So it is really a serious problem. What happens normally is that one or the other of that couple will want to finalize it or get out of the relationship or stop seeing the boyfriend or whatever it is. And he doesn't accept that, so he will pursue her physically. He will always be at her house or at her work. He will write her letters. He will call her on the telephone. He will, she'll come out the front door and he'll be looking at her. And in this book, the incident started when she was at work and she kept coming down the elevator, and as soon as the elevator doors opened, she'd be looking at him. And her only way to deal with that was just to stay in the elevator with all of the other people, which protected her, and went back up to a different floor. So, yeah, it's quite a serious problem, and that continues, and then it can become violent.
Okay, so stalking embraces the violence and the nonviolence. Is that correct?
Yes,
Okay.
absolutely. Well, it usually starts nonviolent.
Okay.
And then it develops.
Okay, but it also includes, it's not just physical presence, it's actually communications.
Oh, yeah, physical contact. Sure.
Okay, so if someone continues to communicate with you, whether it's by phone calls or emails, that could constitute stalking,
Yes.
when you
that's-
no longer want that,
Uh,
okay?
Absolutely. You have no privacy. You know, they're always there. You don't know when. And when they're there, they are engaged with you. In other words, they're not just standing there looking at you. They want you to come with them. They want to talk to you, and let's talk this out, and let's get back together, and that sort of thing.
And are you saying that per the law, it's not illegal until something physical occurs?
Something more than that has to occur, yes. You get a restraining order. If you have a restraining order and the person somehow manages to get inside of your house and you come home and he's there, you can call the police. Then that's what a restraining order will do for you. But if you're in your house and they're out on the sidewalk, there's not a whole lot you can do about that. Because he's just on the sidewalk. He can claim, I'm just driving by here, I'm going to see my friend that's a block away, whatever.
Okay.
They're very clever.
So then, are there any suggestions you could offer to someone who is being stalked? Certainly you mentioned they could go to organizations to better understand the stalker
Right.
themselves, but in terms of the activity, are there any suggestions you might offer to help folks reduce that?
I don't know what they can do, to tell you the truth.
Okay.
And I don't think there's an answer to that just yet.
Okay. So at some point, though, you should contact the police.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, at the very least, you should get a restraining order.
Okay. And what does it take to get a restraining order? Do you need a physical thing to occur or not?
Well, you have to have some history as to the reason why you're getting the restraining order. In the case that I write about here, my protagonist is at work and trying to do her job, and her ex-boyfriend, so to speak, appears in her office and demands to speak with her right then and there, and she does not want to see him, and he becomes abusive with the secretary at the desk, and he creates a fuss, and The rest of the office can't really function while he's doing all of this kind of thing. And then her boss has seen the situation, the secretary has seen the situation, the police are called. Sometimes he won't leave on his own. The police is called, the police escort him out, so the police is aware, and a restraining order, she can file then for a restraining order.
Okay, so getting a restraining order, if appropriate, does seem like certainly a prudent thing to do.
Well, that's the first step, sure.
Okay, what would be a next step?
Oh, golly. Well, unfortunately, sometimes if it progresses to violence, that would be the next step.
Okay.
Yeah.
I mean, would you recommend?
You hope that doesn't happen, of course.
Okay, does this, I mean, I'm just asking questions here, but would you recommend self-defense training?
It wouldn't hurt. It certainly wouldn't hurt.
Okay.
Sure. Because if you're in a public place and he or she, whatever the case is, accosts the victim and there's no one around and so forth, you have to defend yourself, wouldn't you?
It seems so.
I would think so.
Okay, and then at some point, though, I imagine it may be difficult if it is a man that's
Right.
stalking a woman
Right.
and there's a physical
Well, of course, it's
difference
stronger.
there. Yeah.
Sure.
Okay, good. So, I mean, this is not a pleasant topic. I'm wondering, though, if there's something that you might be able to add to this that might provide some hope to someone else who is in a situation where they have legitimate concerns about a stalker.
You know, every situation is different from the next one. People have moved out of the neighborhood, out of the city, they've changed their jobs, they've done all kinds of things just to get physically away from that person. Sometimes that person will pursue the victim to another city. I mean, it depends on how seriously disturbed this stalker is. So, yeah, it's really, it's a very big problem.
Okay, well that does seem like good advice. If the circumstances have escalated to a point where you're feeling like there's a potential threat, I think removing yourself from the environment
Right.
does seem prudent.
Right.
Okay.
So my protagonist had to take some steps which allows her to end in a good place.
Okay.
There's something positive.
Good. All right, we're just about out of time here. I'd like to wrap this up by asking if there's any closing message you'd like to leave for the viewers, and if there's a website that you might have that people can go to for more information.
Sure. My website is www.OurVentura.com. Very simple.
It is simple.
Yeah.
All right. And was there any final message you had?
Well, I hope this helps anybody that's listening that is having a problem to consider what I have said and what they might do to help themselves. And to definitely go on the internet and look up these organizations because they have lots of information.
Thank you very much, Alice.
You're welcome.
This is George Alger signing off for this segment of Our Ventura TV. Until we meet again.